Coming up on this week's show, we have Coastal Magic Convention featured author Tere Michaels. Plus, we've got holiday reading recommendations from Joyfully J.
This is the Big Gay Fiction Podcast, the show for avid readers and passionate fans of gay romance fiction. Each week, we bring you exclusive author interviews, book recommendations, and explore the latest in gay pop culture.
Welcome to episode 167 of the Big Gay Fiction Podcast. I'm Jeff from JeffAdamsWrites.com, and with me as always is my co-host and husband, Will Knaus. This episode of the podcast is brought to you in part by our remarkable group of supporters on Patreon. A big thanks to Terri Beth for joining us this week. If you would like to join our Patreon supporter group, you can just go to patreon.com/biggayfictionpodcast. One thing to note is our patrons all get access to our bonus episodes, and the December bonus episode is something we're recording right after we're done with this. And that'll drop on Tuesday, so a little something bonusy for our Patreons this week.
As I mentioned in the upfront, we got a fantastic show for you coming up. So let's get right to it. First of all, news. Jeff.
Well done.
Jeff, you've got some big news.
Yes, the final piece of all of the Codename Winger stuff for the end of the year clicked in this week as Tracker Hacker, which is book 1 of the series, released on audio for the first time. John Solo does a tremendous job with the recording of this book. I have listened to it because I kind of had to, because I was curious, and I'm super happy with what he did in that book. So if audio's your thing and you'd like to pick up a series about a teenager who plays hockey and, saves the world because he's also a secret agent, you could now pick up Tracker Hacker in audio from the good folks at Audible or iBooks or Amazon.
In the Hockey Player's Heart, the feel-good gay romance by Jeff Adams and Will Knaus, hockey star Caleb Carter returns to his hometown to recover from an injury. He never expects to run into his one-time crush at a grade school fundraiser. Seeing Aaron Price hits him hard, like being checked into the boards. The attraction is still there, even after all these years, and Caleb decides to make a play for the school teacher. You miss 100% of the shots you never take, right? Aaron has been burned by love before and can't imagine what a celebrity like Caleb could possibly see in a guy like him. Their differences are just too great. But as Aaron spends more time with Caleb, he begins to wonder if he might have what it takes to win the Hockey Player's Heart. Get the Hockey Player's Heart in ebook, paperback, or as an audiobook performed by me, Vince Sterling, wherever you buy books.
So really quickly, I want to talk about 2 books that I read this past week. And I'm, of course, continuing the Christmas theme. The first one is a new author to me, which is another theme I've had this year unintentionally. I've been kind of checking out some new authors, which is fun.
It is. And Christmas stories are the perfect way to do it. It's
Yes.
a short little nugget. Test a new author out.
Nugget. So on with the Christmas nuggets. The first book I want to talk about is The Northstar by Elle, Keaton. Oh my God, did I love this book so much. The cover, of course, drew me in at first. I was like, oh, I'm going to check that out. He's really handsome, that guy on the cover. The Northstar is a theater in the Pacific Northwest. It's a sort of like a college town art house movie theater, and John is the guy who's running it, and he's having a very bad Christmas because the bank has said they're going to foreclose at the beginning of the new year.
Oh no.
So he's sort of like down in the dumps. He doesn't even want to finish out the Christmas season. He's feeling really terrible. When along comes a guy named Chance. Chance has a very interesting story. He's from England, and he's flown all the way from the UK to visit the Northstar. Why, you might ask? It's because the Northstar is a very important part of his family history. His mother and father actually met at the Northstar. That was their very first date. So Chance's very existence actually is closely linked to this tiny little movie theater in the Pacific Northwest. And Chance's mother's dying wish was that he go experience the Northstar for himself, since the theater is such an important part of their family mythology. So that's what he does. He hops on a plane and then like gets on a bus and like travels to the middle of nowhere, the Pacific Northwest, and finds that the Northstar is closed. And he's like, well, what the heck is this about? I've traveled all this way. And he goes around to the back to see like John crawling on his hands and knees in the alley because he's trying to like save a little baby kitten from underneath a dumpster. Aww. It's a super cute meet. And Chance is like, having none of this like holiday bah humbugness of John's. And so he like, picks him up by his bootstraps and makes him open the theater for the night. And throughout the story, that's what Chance does, is like giving John a new outlook. And if this theater is going to go away in the new year, they're going to go out with a bang. So he makes sure that the theater is running, and as they get to know one another, they of course fall in love and end up working to save the movie theater. As I mentioned, I loved this story to pieces. I loved the holiday setting, the small town, this little movie theater. They run, It's a Wonderful Life. On Christmas Day, they have they run the entire Die Hard trilogy, and I just love this an awful lot. I really liked John and Chance and the way they kind of connected and got to know one another. Once again, it kind of fed into my deep need for nice guys. I really enjoyed the two of them. Also, really quickly, I want to mention another book that I read this past week. It's called Designer Holiday by McKay. Now, this is the book that they did the cover reveal for in episode 162, and let me tell you, this book is really damn good. This story is about a guy named Ryan who has moved away to the big city and become a professional designer, interior design. Make that perfectly clear. Anyway, so he's come back to his small hometown to help renovate the local theater in Holiday Pines. And in a place called Holiday Pines, the holiday season is, of course, a very big deal. And the center of the very big deal holiday festivities is the local playhouse. And it's, seen better days. It's a little run down and ragged. So the town hires Ryan to come back and refurbish the historic theater. So that's what he's in town for. And when he comes, he runs into Old Flame Emilio. Emilio is a dance teacher in this small town, and he essentially runs the Christmas festival show that goes on every year at the small theater. And so at first they butt heads because they have a shared past. They were boyfriends when they were much younger. Then Ryan went away to school, sort of leaving his, humble small town beginnings behind. And that Emilio felt really abandoned and harbors a lot of resentment about that. So when they meet again now in the present day, Ryan has got an awful lot of work to do because immediately he feels that spark again. Both of them do, but Emilio is really hesitant. He doesn't trust Ryan because of what happened in the past. So as Ryan is working to renovate this theater, he's also working very hard to get back into Emilio's good graces. The renovation goes off splendidly. It reopens, and they start the whole Christmas season with the pageant and the show and all that great stuff. And Emilio's mom sort of plays matchmaker, and she goes, "Oh, Emilio, you haven't put up your Christmas decorations this year. What will all the old town biddies? What will they think when they go through the like historic tour of homes and there's no decorations in your window? Why don't you have Ryan help you with that?" So that's what Ryan does. He helps outfits Emilio's house with baubles and bows and Christmas splendor, and of course they fall back in love during all of this. So I highly recommend checking out Designer Holiday by our good friends McKay.
You had a whole small town theater thing going on this week.
Yeah, it was just one of those things that just happened. Serendipity.
There you go.
Holiday serendipity.
So, in addition to the recommendations you've just given, I talked to our friend Jay from Joyfully Jay earlier this week. They, of course, have a huge array of holiday things going on the website because, as she'll point out here, they've been reading Christmas since October.
As you should.
Exactly. So besides some holiday reads, she's also going to talk to us about their best of, which also kicks off this week. And so she's got a lot of stuff. So let's get to that right now. Very happy to have Jay back on the show. Happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah. We're recording Hanukkah week.
Yeah, exciting. Thanks. Hi, it's great to be here again.
Yeah, great to have you. I know, we're right here in the middle of holiday time. Will's been reading up a storm on the holiday stuff. I've been reading a little bit of it too. What holiday stuff do you have to offer up to the audience?
Well, yeah, we're right in the middle of holiday. The funny thing is, writing a blog, we get everything often early, and like October, all of a sudden we're getting holidays. So like we're now actually reviewing the books, but we've been reading holiday now for like a month and a half. So sometimes by the time December rolls around, we've already read everything. But we have our favorite holiday books list up on the blog, and we just updated it, so it's now current through everything that we read last year. So if you're looking for a holiday, that's a great place to look. Some of my, I guess, sort of all-time favorites. I'm a big fan of Heidi Cullinan's Minnesota Christmas series, so that's one I always like to recommend. It's started out as a trilogy, although it expanded to 4 about 3 friends, and each one was released a year apart. So that's sort of a classic. That's sort of a super sexy, small town Minnesota. Everyone knows everyone else's business kind of story, which I really love. Another one, if you like sort of fun, sweet fantasy, and series finished last year, but I always loved Charlie Cochet's North Pole City Tales series, which is sort of a fantasy-ish adaptation of the Christmas story. So the reindeer they all fly biplanes, and there's, Jack Frost is a real person, and Rudy Reindeer, and Santa is a real person, and they all sort of have this little world that they're living in, and each year features a different one of the reindeer. So that's sort of more on the fun and sweet side, which is also another fun one. And on the Hanukkah end, I read last year, which I really loved and would definitely recommend again, Remaking of Corbin Whale by Roan Parrish, which is a great Hanukkah story. It features a baker and the guy who comes to work for him. And, Roan is fabulous with like just character development. I really think she excels in that. And they're so layered and so interesting. And there's a really neat sort of wildness to Corbin that I really like. And plus it's like total bakery food porn. Like after you read it, you will want to be like baking babka. I was like Googling babka recipes as if I was going to make this like 6-hour dessert that it takes to make babka. But if you're looking for Hanukkah, that's a really nice one, and it's a beautiful story. And it's not it incorporates the holiday really nicely while also having sort of this broader romance. So definitely, if you're itching for Hanukkah stories, check out our favorites list. And also, just for a seasonal mention, I'll toss in, we also have, because this is a personal favorite of mine, favorite snowbound stories list as well, which I'll give you guys the link to, because I love those forced proximity, like road trips, snowbound, like anytime 2 people are stuck together like that. So we have a list of our favorite snowbound stories, which is also sort of a little bit seasonal now for people who it seems like this time of year you get a lot of them. Well, obviously, I guess because it's winter, but
forced proximity and snowbound is like crack for Will.
Yes.
I mean, he is all over that.
Yeah. Snowbound is totally my crack. I feel like Snowbound's the winter version and Road Trip's the summer version, and they're like, the same concept, but I love that. I love that forced proximity. So, and in fact, the Minnesota Christmas has a Snowbound in the first book, I believe. So that plays in well. And actually, one of the ones I read this year that I liked, Better Not Pout by Annabeth Albert, that also has a little bit of a small snowbound element, and that was a fun holiday small town story. It was military small town with a small town guy, and the military man Nick is getting ready to retire and move to Florida, and he's sort of feels like he's kind of washed up for life because now the military is all he's known, and he does this last Santa gig before he heads out of town and meets this, guy who grew up in the small town, and of course fall in love, and romance and hijinks ensue. But that was a fun holiday story this year. And I'm trying to think what else I read. I really think the Christmas Angel collection, I don't know if you've read any of those. This was sort of cool. A group of authors all came together and wrote some, each book is standalone, but there is a thread that ties in about this Christmas Angel, and it goes all the way from way back historical, just through contemporary stories. And in fact, I read N.R. Walker has one, Soldier's Wish, that's Vietnam era, which is so rare in LGBT romance, and romance in general. Takes place partly during Woodstock and then with a soldier who goes off to war. But Jordan L. Hawke has a book in that series, Kim Fielding, R.J. Scott. And so it's sort of neat because you can jump in and out of the different books and you can read them in any order, but it's sort of neat to see how they each work in this angel into the story. So that's kind of a fun one. And I think there's 7 or 8 books. They all dropped on the same day, but there's a big bunch of them.
Yeah, we just got those, and there's a couple of them. I'm intrigued as you are with the series as a whole, but there's one or two. There's one that's a Christmas Prince, and I love Prince stories, and I'm really eager to be reading that one.
I think that was R.J. Scott's.
I think so.
Yeah. We just reviewed it. I'm not the one who read it, but yeah, sort of neat. And Jordan L. Hawke's I read also, and hers is vaudeville era, about a vaudeville magician. So just some interesting time periods that you don't get very often either, which is sort of fun. So it was interesting to see how they can sort of put together a series that's not a series, but I'm seeing a lot more of that actually. The sort of authors coming together to make, a collection or even an anthology, although that's more common.
Shared universe stuff, the heart-to-heart anthologies that have happened.
Right.
All have that thread of the dating app.
Yes, yeah. So it's sort of fun to do that, especially something like this where you don't have to read sequentially, you don't have to read them all for it to make sense, and you can sort of jump in and out depending on what strikes your interest. So that's sort of fun.
So we're also in the middle of annual favorites list time.
Yeah. It's interesting to see, we all read different things, even though some of us, we end up overlapping. So it's interesting to see the breadth of different book recommendations. So mine's coming out this week, but I'll give you a little sneak peek of a couple of mine that stood out for me this year. One of them that I went crazy for, and I think we might have talked about this on the podcast, was Whisper by Tal Bauer, which, just as a recap, features a CIA agent who is an expert in Afghanistan, and it kicks off at the start of 9/11, and Afghanistan is sort of a back burner kind of country in terms of what the CIA's attention's on until, the attacks happen, and suddenly he's thrust into the forefront of, the whole investigation, and he gets grouped with some Marines who are first on the ground in Afghanistan in the hunt for bin Laden. So it's just a fascinating story because there's so much that really reads almost like nonfiction, like you're reading an account of the investigation. And I think partly because Bauer does so much research, and a lot of the conversations and things that they've had are taken from transcripts that really happened of interviews with subjects and things. So it has such a real feeling and so much urgency as you're reading it. And at the same time, then there's a romance that develops between Chris, the agent, and one of the Marines. And, you follow that all the way through, and there's a crisis that happens, and the romance where they, you're waiting for them to sort of get back together and everything to work out. So that was like an 800-page book that I read in 48 hours. I mean, could not put it down. So that was one of my favorites. Another one that I read more recently that's been getting a lot of buzz is Oz by Lily Morton. I don't know if you've read any of her books. She's amazing. This Oz is actually a spin-off of her Mixed Messages series. So Rule Breaker, Deal Maker, and then there's one more that I'm forgetting. And so this is a spin-off that features the brother of one of the main characters. And her stuff is such a good combination of humor and banter and quippy, sort of that high energy feel, with really great layered characters and great romance. And so Oz is about a sort of young guy who is grew up poor background and lost his job and is looking for something else. And he interviews for a caretaker position of this property in Cornwall. So, you know, in the state of and now I'm going to forget which nobility level it was, but, and he figures when he sees all these posh interviewees that he has no chance. So he sort of goes into the interview with total irreverence and, you know, just takes it really casual, and so his surprise gets hired. So then he comes out here to this sort of wilds of Cornwall and meets the Lord of the Manor. And there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of banter, a lot of humor, a lot of fun. And it's just all of that overmixed with these two, you know, vulnerable guys who fall for one another, and so romantic, so fun and sexy and sweet. And I recommend everything of hers, but absolutely loved this one. And there's more to come. You'll probably know as soon as you read it who the next book is going to be about. But I'll leave that a secret because it's sort of fun. But it's yeah, I'm really excited about that. Her stuff, it's funny, you know, I picked her first book up, the first book of hers that I read at one of our challenge months. So I guess the 2017. And I purely picked it up because I was looking for a self-published author, and she sent in a request, and I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot, and just went crazy for her stuff. So now I think at least one of hers was last year, was in one of my annual favorites, and again this year. So definitely excited about that. So I've got to figure out what else is going to be on there, but those lists are all out or coming out this week. So check them out. We'll do our favorite covers as well, which is always a fun one for me because I'm a big fan of cover art and really think it can make or break a book, especially on first impression. So I always love to give some notice or some recognition to the cover artists who can put together something amazing from often not a lot of information, and really sell a book and get the mood and the theme and everything really in there.
Very cool. We'll, of course, have links to all of the lists and all of the books in the show notes for this episode, so people can go check all of that out.
Great.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us and giving us this good stuff. Happy Hanukkah, since we're recording this week. Happy holidays and Happy New Year.
Thank you to you as well.
And we already know we're going to have you back in February to be with us for our Coastal Magic preview, which will happen the week before Coastal Magic actually happens.
I'm really excited about that.
Already excited about the beach in February.
I know. Gosh, there's something so nice about being in Daytona in the middle of February, isn't there? Yeah, I'm excited for that.
All right, Jay. Well, thank you so much, and we'll see you in a few weeks.
Great. Sounds good.
Want to hang out with us between shows? Check us out on Facebook. You never know what we might post. News about book sales, bonus video content, and maybe even a live broadcast or two. Like us today at facebook.com/Big Gay Fiction Podcast and see what we get up to next.
And thanks again to Jay from Joyfully Jay for coming to hang out with us with that stuff. You definitely need to check out the Snowbound list, because, you know, that's kind of your crack in a way, which is, as I mentioned in the interview. Everything is linked up to... What?
It's good. Crack is whack, yo. I would prefer to say it's my catnip. It's my catnip. Continue.
Thank you. Catnip, crack, you know. Anyway, all of the stuff that Jay mentioned is linked up in our show notes, so you can get to Joyfully Jay to check out the holiday recommendations, the best of list, and the all-important Snowbound list. Coming up now, we've got our interview with Tere Michaels. Tere is one of our Coastal Magic Convention featured authors, so we are very excited to get to see her down in Daytona Beach in February for that convention. Tere has a new book coming out next week, which is a collection of short stories that help to cap off the Faith, Love, and Devotion series. It's called Forever and Ever, and it releases rather appropriately, I think, on Christmas Day. We also talked to her about her teaching and the work that she does with Book Lovers Con. So let's get to this jam-packed interview.
Welcome to the podcast, Tere.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
Absolutely. I'm so glad we finally get to sit down and have a proper interview. You've been on a couple times, but it's always for like, hey, what's happening right now kind of stuff. And...
I'm breaking news, but this time we're actually having a nice interview.
Yes, a proper sit-down chat that doesn't involve any Disney rain showers.
Thank God. Or that lizard that was on the wall behind me that I tried not
Yes, the lizard who dropped in to visit the last time.
Exactly. There are no lizards. And I locked the door so my cat can't get in, so we're fine.
No, very good. Even keeping the pets out. So when you were here in September, we were talking all about the 10th anniversary of Faith and Fidelity, which was happening right around the time we did that interview. And now you're here because on Christmas Day, in just a week, you're going to be releasing Forever and Ever, which is the final book in this series.
Yes, it is.
Tell us all about it. What's happening here?
Well, after Truth and Tenderness, I figured the story was over and I would do a couple of one-shots. But stories started kind of piling up, and I started thinking about different things I'd like to share with readers. The guys becoming grandparents, the kids growing up. I mean, they were so little in book one, and it's about 15 years. It's been 10 years in real time, but it's about 15 years total in book time. To see the kids all grown up, to see them experiencing a sort of level of satisfaction in their lives that is so far removed from the beginning of book one. And also, of course, the wedding that everyone wanted to see. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go out with fun holiday themed collection of stories. There's Christmas, there's weddings, there's babies, there's, dealing with getting older. I'm 50 and my mom passed this year, and there were a lot of things that I was thinking about in terms of growing older and the things that pop up as you reach a certain age. And I wanted to share that with readers. So that's basically what happened there.
It sounds kind of fun how you said it against holidays and like major life moments, the wedding, the children, and that kind of thing. Was that kind of like the keystone to each of the stories, or?
Yes, I had done two Christmas themed stories for my newsletters. And in the second story, the girls were pregnant. That's not a spoiler if you've seen those stories. But from there, it sort of grew from those holiday themed stories that I wanted to do more. And once I got into what happened, these stories just kept popping up and popping up and popping up. And, it just took on a life of its own.
Now, theoretically, this is the end of it, but would you be open to another set if more stories keep popping up, or is it like, you guys need to shut up now because we're done?
I don't think I can take them any further. Like, I felt that Truth and Tenderness, it ended with a baby on the way for Griffin and Jim, and basically the implication that Evan and Matt had gotten married secretly. And I felt like that was a good ending. But my readers disagreed with me and were constantly like, are we getting more? Are we getting more? Are we getting more? And I didn't want to write a full book with one storyline because I think that would have me putting their relationship in danger again or adding something to calamitous. And quite honestly, I didn't want to write that book. These are people who have been through enough in their lives, and I wanted them to kind of enjoy the next, I guess, thinking about the next segment of their life, and just having them enjoy it. But they're done. They're done. It's over. It's finished. Believe me, people are not happy, but I feel like 10 years is a really good run.
I would say so. Just given some of what I've seen too, where you don't get a lot of series that focus pretty intensely on one couple and one.
Right.
There's all the shared series, shared universes and stuff that can go on forever. But yeah, one couple needs to have that EGA permanently.
Period. Like, they're super happy, you guys. I swear. Like, I love the last story, the last little story. It's, to me, the best thing that I could have probably ended it on. And it's not anything big, but it's just this big sprawling group of people who created this very loud, very sarcastic family who would do anything for each other. And I mean their extended family, all the couples and the kids, etc. And, I just love the little vision that I go out on. So I hope everybody else will love it too.
What was it like for you after, 10 years of these characters to now be putting the period on it?
You know what? When I started, I was like, okay, this is the completion of it. I'm a completionist. This is the period on the end of the sentence that I feel firm about. This is good. This is whatever. But I just did the last review of the galleys and sent it back. And I was like, holy crow, that's it. Like, wow. Part of me is happy with the way they're quote unquote going out because it's beautiful. On the other hand, it's a little sad. Like, I love all these people. I love all these characters, They're characters, but in my head, they're people.
Yeah.
They've been living in my head for a very long time. The genesis of the first book started 18 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, so they've been around for a really long time. So it's a little bit hard to let them go, to be quite honest, but I have to. I have to.
Across all those books, was there anything that you ended up writing going, whoa, didn't see that one coming?
The wedding, actually. The Matt and Evan getting married. I was just having a conversation with somebody this past Monday, and they were like, did you ever imagine? And I never did. I did not think that was something that was going to happen. And even in the fifth book, I was very resistant to it. There's actually a very funny story where a fan and I, who's actually a very good friend of mine, got into a fight, air quote fight, in a bar, where she was like, they have to get married. And I was like, they're not getting married. And like, this is just a famous argument that we had. So them getting married was a big surprise to me because that is not something that I ever plotted out, ever.
In looking for the HEAs that, we all want to give our romance characters, why never a wedding in your original concept? Just, you didn't want to tell that story, or?
It did not seem to fit their personalities.
Okay, that's
Griffin,
fair.
The character of Griffin definitely had he wanted the moment to be the groom. He wanted to get married. And he was traditional that way. He's the youngest of like 10 girls, I think. And he had a very specific idea for a wedding. And Jim would do anything for him. But Evan already got married, and even that time was at the city hall. This is not he doesn't come from a big warm family. There is nothing about his past that said big wedding. And I felt like I would be forcing that. And so I wanted to write the wedding as I felt it would be for them, which is eloping. And when I wrote it, it was the last thing I wrote in the book. It's the first thing in the book, but it was the last thing I wrote. And it took me a lot of time to make sure that it was the most authentic thing for these characters. I never wanted to force the characters into a situation because of expectation. It always had to feel really emotionally valid for me, particularly for these two characters.
I love that. When we talked back in September, you described yourself, and I believe the exact quote was, little baby author, back when Faith and Fidelity, came out. What got you into writing that particular book and writing romance in particular?
I have always wanted to be a writer. I started very young, like 5-6 years old. I would write stories on the back of paper that I got from school or whatever, old bills, whatever I could. I wrote on everything. And writing took different forms. I did different types of books, but I was a big romance reader. That was the first romance book I ever read was Danielle Steele's Palomino. That was my very first romance novel. So I sort of meandered through a lot of different types of stories. I wasn't writing at all for many years. I was writing professionally. I worked for Martha Stewart magazine for a couple of years. I wrote for her magazine. And I was put on bed rest in my last trimester. I couldn't commute into work. I didn't have anything to do. And this story just sort of happened in my head. The character of Evan came to me first. And I had a very clear picture of this man who was extremely emotionally constipated, who was a father of 4 children, whose wife did all the emotional heavy lifting in his life. He had never known anybody else. She was the only person he'd ever loved, and he died. And my literal thought was, what is the most complicated thing I could do for him to fall in love? Like, what is the most complicated situation for him to fall in love? And it was a man. Mm-hmm. And that's honestly, I wrote this book. To be quite honest, I did not know that gay romance existed in publishing at the time. I wrote this story, I put it aside, and saw an ad one day for this company called Loose Id, and said, oh my goodness, they published gay romance. That's crazy. And on Facebook, I said, hey, has anybody heard of this company, Loose Id? And somebody who's a very good friend of mine said, do you know what I do for a living? And I said, I have no idea. And she said, I'm one of the partners of Loose Id. I had no idea.
Wow. Small world.
It was the most bizarre thing. She's like, did you not know what I did for a living? And she didn't do editorial, but she's like, you better have a book in your pocket. And I was like, oh, weirdly enough, I do actually have this story. And I sent it in, and that was it. I absolutely wrote this book before I knew that there was an industry out there, and sort of fell into it. And when I say little baby author, I had no idea what I was doing. I sent it in and was like, oh, you want to buy it? Okay.
Cool.
Cool. And about 3 months later, it came out. Like,
wow, 3 months later.
Yeah, the whole thing took maybe 4 months from me submitting it until the book coming out.
You mentioned the kind of 8-year gap between the seed of the idea and getting it published. How much did you do on it in that 8-year gap? Was it just waiting for the Loose Id to kind of pop on your radar, or was it continual like tweaks and edits? And
to be quite honest, the book that I wrote, there were almost no edits from what I wrote into what was published. There's almost no edits. I write final drafts. I don't write drafts. I write final drafts. Like, wow. It's in my head for such a long time that by the time I write it, it's the final draft. But there was very minimal editing. And it was literally something that I put away and then pulled out and dusted off and sent it in.
The definition of the trunk novel, practically.
Yeah, really, I mean, literally. Funnily enough, it's the only book I had ever written at that point that was finished. So it's not like I have a drawer full of finished manuscripts that I can pull out and clean up and send in. That was it. There was one.
Everybody's style kind of course, evolves over the years. How do you think your style and storytelling method has evolved over the 10 years?
That's a hard one because I don't know if it has. My writing style is pretty much the same. My process is pretty much the same. I think I've gotten a bit tighter. I don't like long passages of nothing happening. So my books have gotten actually a little shorter. I think I'm a much tighter. I'm a lot tighter when I write. That's pretty much it. I think I'm just stuck in a groove that I'm never going to get out of.
It's not a bad place to be, though.
It's not a terrible groove. I'm just saying I don't know how to change it.
And that's okay, because it works. I mean, that's the important thing.
Yeah, hopefully. Not good. Keep going.
Now, what do you think the trademark of one of your books is? Like,
I write about normal, good people who can't get out of their own way and are trying to fix their lives. And I think that there will always be snark. There will always be more internal emotional conflict as opposed to external conflict. I don't think I write a lot of external conflict. and always a well-earned happy ending. So I think that those are my, but deflection through humor would also be a large part of it. I think that no matter what the genre, no matter what the time or place, those are always going to show up in my stories.
I like those. I like especially the earned.
Earned. You got to earn it. This is not an easy, you don't get any passes from me. You're going to have to work for it.
Now, besides writing, you also teach all these new baby authors and even more skilled authors out there. What got you going down that path?
It was something that I wanted to try, and a friend asked me to do a workshop at a local event. Liberty States was the first time I ever taught, and I taught supporting characters, which has long been a hallmark class that I teach. I don't know, getting up in front of people and talking, not a natural thing for me. But getting up and talking about process, I feel like I was hooked from the first time I did it. Like, I was a nervous wreck, but once I got started, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. Honestly, I love talking about process to writers. I love trying to help people sort of find the tools to look at their own writing to make it better. It is so much fun. I enjoy the heck out of it.
How much of what you teach is your own kind of process versus other things you've just learned over time and pulling from other places and kind of mashing it all together?
I think it's less because my process is crazy. We can discuss what it is, but I mean, it's nuts. I would never advise people to write the way I write because it's ludicrous. But I try to help them figure out the questions to ask of themselves, to figure out their own process. To me, the biggest thing that I can impart is for people to look at their own process of writing, identify their strengths and their weaknesses, and then work on what they want to work on. So to me, it's more about helping people figure out what tools they need. But yeah, I don't teach anybody my process because it's ludicrous. I mean, it's ludicrous. So.
And so, of course, the natural question there is, because I was going to ask, do you practice what you preach kind of thing? And clearly you don't. So what is this crazy process you've got?
No, actually I do. At Dream Spinner Weekend, I taught several classes, and my editor was in the back of the room, and I went up to her and I was like, do I practice what I preach? And she was like, yes. I said, okay, good.
Okay, that's good.
That is good. My process is I will get a scrap of an idea and needle it in my head over and over and work on the emotional arc and who the characters are. And it usually takes me about a year before I even put paper to pen to paper. That's what it is. And even start to sort of sketch out a story and then start naming the characters. It takes me about a year to get to that point. And then I'll write several drafts of a very long, detailed summary until I'm happy with it. Then I will write the first chapter over and over again until it's to what I want. Then I'll write the first 3 chapters. And when I'm satisfied with that, I'll write the last chapter. And then I'll write the rest of the book. Out of order, by the way. So I would not teach that to anyone and say, this is how you should write a book, because it's nutty. But I have to do very little draft work after that. Mm-hmm. In that case, that's my final. Once I start writing that document, once I'm happy with the first 3 chapters and the last 1 to 3 chapters, then the rest of it is just piecing it together the way I wanted, because I've spent so much time with it in my head. I've written all the drafts of it in my head, and then I sit down and actually write the final.
How long did it take you to settle on this process? Was it all the way back there in Faith and Fidelity, or did it kind of morph and get locked in over time?
I think the roots of it were definitely with Faith and Fidelity, but really the second book, Love and Loyalty, is when that happened. I had written almost a complete draft of the book and decided, no, it didn't work, and put that aside. and then went back, and it took me several tries before I got to it. And then once I got to it, then I was fine. I wrote it very quickly after that. Same with Duty and Devotion. Like, once I get the beginning, then I can write through, then it's not a problem. But I have to be happy with the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I'm trying to think about that as, in terms of process. Like, wow, I see what you call it nutty.
Could you imagine me trying to teach that? Try to convince people, like, yes, you should walk around writing drafts of your book in your head for 2 years and then write it. Like, no. Publishing would, like, come after me. It would go out on me.
How do you do a schedule with that type of process in mind, or do you have different, or you just kind of produce it as it comes out?
You produce it as it comes out. So that might mean a month with 0 words and then a month with 40 words or 40,000 words. It's a Duty and Devotion took me, once I got the opening few chapters done, took me 3 days. Yeah. So it really depends on how quickly the book just comes out of my head. But like I said, I spend a lot of time noodling with it before I even get to that point to sit down and write it.
That's very cool. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, but
could practically do a whole episode talking about that process moment.
I would love to, because I guess I could analyze it, but it's just until the emotional arc makes perfect sense in my head, I can't start writing.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of an important message for the writers in the audience to know, that find your process and use it, regardless of what it is. You've got your process that you won't teach because it is what it is, and you got to find that thing that's yours.
Right. And you can't adopt other people's process. I will never write 1,000 words a day. It's absolutely impossible for me. That's not the way my brain works. And I hate to see writers get frustrated with themselves because they can't fulfill other people's process. And so they think they're a failure in some way. Yeah. And that just, it kills your creative process. It makes you dread sitting down, and you should be, even in your most frustrating moments, still in love with your story. And so I'm a big advocate of figuring out what your process is, understanding it, and then making the best of it.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite thing to teach? You've got your signature course. Is the secondary characters your favorite, or do you have something that is like the thing that you always want to teach?
I love teaching emotional arc. I do love secondary characters because anybody who's read my books knows that I am incapable of having less than 50 supporting characters. And not even spin-off characters, just a village in every book. But I love teaching emotional arc because my gospel is it's the most important piece of a book, particularly a romance novel, is the emotional arc. So I love teaching emotional arc. Like, I could teach it for 5 hours.
And having been to some of your courses, I can tell people, if you haven't been to a Tere Michaels course, go to one.
Oh, thank you.
Because they're really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're actually coming to your Coastal Magic class.
Hooray! I'm teaching emotional arcs.
Yay. Perfect. And we'll talk more about Coastal in a second, because we need to talk about your other convention work first.
Yeah.
Amongst all this other stuff that you do, you also do a lot with Book Lovers Convention, which, as people know, is formerly RT Book Lovers Convention.
Yes. Some of the folks involved after RT's owners retired, a couple of the folks involved with RT Book Lovers Con moved on to their own convention, which is Book Lovers Con. I am the director of marketing and events. So I do a lot of the programming for the event and some marketing and things like that. I enjoy it. I love the opportunity to get readers and authors together. There's many authors out there that their skill is hand selling. If you put them with readers will fall in love with them. And this is a great opportunity for authors and readers to get together. And then I also do the professional development programming. So I set up all the craft and marketing classes, which, I love it. So yeah, that's what I do in most of my time. So
The bigger question is, when do you sleep between the writing and the teaching and the book lovers and family? And
yeah, I don't know. Like, I get a good 5 hours of sleep.
there you go. Now, in February, you're going to be down at Daytona,
Yes.
hanging out on the beach, getting out of the cold Northeast where you live.
Yes.
What is it about Coastal Magic that brings you back year after year as one of the featured authors?
Coastal is absolutely one of my favorite events that I do all year. I think Jennifer and her crew do an amazing job. I love the intimacy of it, where you really get some one-on-one time with readers. It's very casual, but it's just a bunch of people who love books, like hanging out at the beach. Like, you really cannot stress enough how awesome that is. Yeah, I love that it's kind of a smaller version of what I do professionally in the very large version. This is sort of the small version of it, where these readers they just want to meet authors and they want to find new books and new authors to read. And I deeply appreciate that in a person. So yeah, I love it. As long as Jennifer wants me, I'll be there.
How many years have you been?
Every year but the first, I believe.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's very cool.
The second or the third, yeah. So I've been going for a couple of years now.
What are you looking forward to this year, other than the aforementioned getting out of the cold?
There is getting out of the cold. There's, seeing, once you go to an event every year, you make friends that unfortunately you only get to see once a year because of location. So I always look forward to seeing people and readers that I've, met over the years, and also meeting new readers. Like, I love that sort of discovery of, doing a panel and having somebody come up to you afterwards and be like, all right, you're ridiculous. I would like to read a book of yours. So I love that. It's tons of fun.
What would your pitch be to a reader who's on the fence about coming to Daytona in February?
I don't know how to convince anybody. If you're a book lover and you enjoy being warm, you should come to Daytona in February for Coastal Magic. Like, literally, I mean, it's warmth and books. I know of no better selling point than that.
That's a perfect pitch. That could be on a T-shirt or something.
Jennifer, if you're listening, we would like a T-shirt of that. Thank you.
Yes. Terry, we'll take all the royalties for it.
I'll split them. I'm a generous person.
So with Forever and Ever coming out on the 25th for Christmas, what's coming up next in your writing pipeline?
In my writing pipeline, 2019 will see the debut of a new series. It is a series about a show on Broadway. Yes. I've been dying to do that. As you know, I'm a huge Broadway fan. And I had this very specific vision in my head for the opening scene of the first book. And it led to, it'll be a 3-book series. It'll take you through the, from casting to opening night of this show, and 3 separate couples. But of course, it's me. So it's a cast of 50, and everybody will be in all the books. And for anybody who's read my novella, my holiday novella, Holiday Roommates, you might see that couple show up in this series.
Oh.
I got very excited when I realized I was casting a Broadway show in my books, and that I could hire one of my past characters. I got very excited by this.
That's pretty cool. And of course, Broadway show, you've got me hooked, like, without knowing anything else, really.
It's going to be fun. It's a subject I love, and it's going to be a little bit lighthearted, but still some, drama and angst here and there. But, I'm very excited about it. And then there'll be a standalone book happening probably 2019 or maybe 2020, but I can't really talk about that yet.
Okay. Fair enough. I'm thinking about this cast of 50 that we've talked about a couple of times now. You must be like audiobook narrators must panic when they get your books with all these characters in them.
I apologize because, especially for this last book, if you've read the series, there's a lot of people already, and the children have begun growing up and breeding. So by the time I got to the final story in the anthology, it was just like a cast of 60 running around and trying to keep people straight. And blessings forever on the head of Jen Eastwick, who is my editor, who kept track of everybody's ages and names. She's a saint because I could not possibly keep track of everybody.
It becomes a lot if all your books have 50 characters on them.
It's a lot. I wrote a novella once where there were only 5 supporting characters, but also a cat that had a lot of personality. So I can't be stopped. I can't be stopped. I'm sorry.
And no one wants you to stop. So
okay, as long as nobody minds.
So what's the best way for everybody to keep up with you online and be aware of when all these books are coming out?
Well, my website is terrymichaels.com. I am on Twitter. Again, at Tere Michaels. I'm also on Facebook. I am not the best at social media because I'm old and I don't understand it. But I am on as much as possible. And if you go to my website and send me a message, I always respond very quickly.
Very cool. Well, Terry, thank you so much for coming and hanging out and talking to us about Forever and Never and about Coastal Magic and all the good stuff coming up.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Once again, thank you to Terry for coming and talking to us about her latest release. Terry's one of my absolute favorite people. I love her to pieces.
Yeah, I do as well. It's always awesome to get to talk to her. I'm very much looking forward to not only getting to hang out with her in Daytona for Coastal Magic, but we're also both going to her boot camp class that she's teaching just ahead of Coastal Magic. So we get to learn some of that groovy stuff that she teaches.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So I think that'll do it for this week's episode. Coming up next week in episode 168, we have audiobook narrator John Solo.
Yeah, as I mentioned up front, John voiced Tracker Hacker, and I was absolutely delighted with it, so I wanted to get him on the show to talk to him. But he's also done like 100 other titles. The guy works really hard. He's also the owner of Falcon Sound Company, which does a lot of work with Dreamspinner Press. So we have a really good conversation about my book and the other books that he's done.
Mm-hmm. Chances are, if you've listened to a gay-themed audiobook, he has probably had something to do with it.
At some point, yes. Either as the narrator or the producer of that book, yes.
Yeah, a really great interview. So everyone be sure and check that out next week. So guys, remember, no matter where life takes you, the journey will always be sweeter when you have a book. Until next time, everyone, please keep turning those pages and keep reading.
For detailed show notes and links to everything discussed in this episode, go to biggayfictionpodcast.com. New episodes are available every Monday at all major podcast distributors. You can also find us on YouTube. I'm Derek McLean. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.